How are you?
Yeah. I'm all good, thanks. All good. Yeah, I've got a jumper. I've been out with honey because it's bloody cold out there,
It's freezing.
isn't it? Yeah. And yeah, I'll turn the heating off. I'll put it on later, but it's cold in the house. Got a really cold house.
It gets cold here too, right? Yeah.
And how are you two?
All right. You're a bit sleepy. Are you sleepy at all? Or just pain? Fatigue? Yeah. You're all right. It's not as bad as today? Or is it pretty bad still? It's not as bad.
But you're
Yes.
still in quite a lot of pain, Seth. Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh God. All right.
Never ends. When can we start? Or what? Pain? Endo? Bladder. Bladder. It's just from the hysterectomy. Damn hysterectomy.
Really? So is it scar tissue affecting the bladder from the hysterectomy?
Um, they don't know yet.
Okay.
He has to do a urine and blood test. They like the neurologist did asked her to do so many tests. It's like a CT scan, ultrasounds, and now she just has to do blood and urine, and then they get the test results back, and then we see them next month or something. And then he wants to do like an investigation to find out what's happening. So, but like, if you do find something, are you actually going to do something about it, or you just going to leave it and wake her up to do another surgery?
Right. So more, you got more questions like that.
Yeah.
Right. Are you happy with the endocrinologist or the neurologist?
No, are you happy with him? That's a bit. He didn't. He thought Sev had like an intellectual disability, so it's kind of like talking like she was a baby. And Sev's like, I can understand you.
Right. Yeah.
Like, he doesn't have an intellectual disability.
Yeah. And did you tell him that? Because sometimes you just have to be so blunt, don't you? You did tell him. Good. Great. Okay. Did he completely change how he communicated after that? Okay, brilliant. Thank God. Okay, good. And is he a surgeon and a neurologist?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good. Whew. Good luck with that. I hope it is a productive pathway, medical pathway for you.
I hope so.
Welcome back to Abled and Disabled. Today, we are talking to my old manager from Northwood about managing people who have disabilities and chronic illnesses like me. Don't worry, I didn't just tell her that I have resigned as she had left a few months ago. Also about her own chronic illness and how it affected her work too.
What are some of the most rewarding aspects of working in the disability field?
I'd say this isn't a very original answer, but it would be meeting people and families and listening to their stories and learning from them. And so you can provide a kind of better service for other families and people. So yeah, meeting lots and lots of different people that I would never have met before and listening to yeah, how amazing a lot of people are.
How did your role in the disability field contribute to advocating for accessibility and inclusivity?
I missed the first couple of words. How did
How did your
How
role?
did your role in the disability field contribute to advocating for accessibility and inclusivity?
I think my role was helpful in supporting more people with disabilities to be employed at Northcott, and so they were more visible, because a lot of people, a lot of workers see disability as something separate. So I think one of the things that we managed to do is talk about disability as something that affects us all, and talk about that. So I think that was the single most powerful thing to make Northcott a more inclusive place, and for us to kind of practice inclusivity, and because it came from people who were physically disabled like you, Sev, but then you could say, hey, guess what other disabilities I've also got as well. So it really challenged people's notions of disability, because they had these very old-fashioned ideas that, oh, a person in a wheelchair, that's disability. Things that you could see, easy to see visually.
You gonna write something? No. Okay. Can you share a memorable experience that highlights the impact of your work on individuals with disabilities?
Again, I suppose it was people working with people like you, Sev, and Shirley, and Greta, and Ben, and others, and they're having their voice listened to, and those audiences kind of got bigger, particularly around the NDIS. So, first of all, it was just teams at Northcott, and then it was, when the CEO had a talk, it was a couple of hundred people, and then when the NDIS came on, you and Greta and Shirls and Ben and others were able to talk to loads of people from other organizations, and people. I can remember Shirls sitting on the stage at the Olympic Stadium, and hundreds of people in front of her, and I can remember you being in one of those forums and answering questions from the audience. So I think those were really the most powerful things.
Yeah. One help. Yeah. That one?
What are some of the biggest challenges you faced while working in the disability field?
That division between us and them, that concept that people would say is othering nowadays. People with disabilities are seen as the other people, the people that we're here to serve, and that's just such nonsense. If you think about 1 in 4 people have got disabilities in Australia, and they include things like bipolar disease and Asperger's, and none of those things are visible. So I'd say that's the most challenging thing, because almost everybody has got a friend or a relative with mental illness, but they don't think of that as a disability, although it is. Lots of people have got endocrinological, no, that's the wrong word, autoimmune diseases, or conditions that are hugely physically disabling, but you can't see them. So yeah, that kind of that false idea about real disabilities are the ones you can see.
Yeah. How did you collaborate with other professionals to support individuals with disability?
Slowly. And I guess not assuming that they knew how to support people either. So, that kind of that slogan about nothing about us without us, really, I just saw myself as being able to link the employee who needed some accommodations at work with one or two people who could support them, and just hopefully be able to support that communication. But a lot of the time it was about gently educating people about what an accommodation at work meant, because people still think, oh, that's a ramp, or that's an automatic opening door, and they don't think about not using fluorescence because they can trigger migraines, not having noisy clocks or air conditioning units if someone has got autism and gets triggered by loud noises or persistent noises. So yeah, it's a slow education, and again, that shouldn't just be one person. That needs to be a kind of cultural shift. A whole organization needs to be engaged with that.
Yes. Definitely.
Yes, you're nodding. Yeah, you know all about that, Sam.
You want me to say? She says, I'm sorry, I would type more, but I don't feel well, just from pain. Yeah. Do you want to continue? Okay.
Yeah, we can, tell me if you want to stop, and we can do it another time. So
No, she wants to continue.
yep, go for it. Okay, yeah, all good.
What strategies did you find most effective in promoting independence and empowerment among your clients or patients?
Strategies. I would say, so when I think of the most effective way, one of the most effective strategies of working with people, it was about finding out what their priorities were, and also finding out what their knowledge was. Because I learned quite early on, being a student social worker, that obviously nobody ever wants to sit down and answer an assessment. That's not a priority of a person with a disability or their family member. So trying to make it really light for the not doing admin with people, that's just such an abuse of their time, a waste of their time, and not assuming people know some of the basics. So I can remember meeting a family, and their daughter was quite severely disabled, and she was kept in an upstairs room all day in the daytime. And I said to them, oh, there are some I wouldn't have used the word day programs, but there are places that your daughter might be able to go to have some nice experiences and meet some other people and get out of the house. They had no idea that there were any services for her. She'd gone to school, but once she left school, she just stayed at home every single day. So because I didn't make that assumption, I introduced her to some day programs, and she loved it and blossomed. And, so we got out of the house, the family didn't have to take her, she was picked up. And so just basic stuff like that. So yeah, not assuming that people know what they're entitled to as well, especially if people are new to a country or English isn't their first language.
Yeah. Is it my turn? Okay. How has your perspective on disability rights and accommodations evolved over your career?
So disability rights is something that I kind of smirk at a little bit, because I wouldn't use the two together, because what I'd say is human rights. Because as soon as someone hears disability, they think, oh, it's something specific for a person with disability, and it's not. And that's one of the things in the report from the Royal Commission into violence of people with disabilities. They said that organizations really need a lot of training on human rights. They need to understand human rights, and they need to understand how it applies to them providing a service. So my understanding has evolved from disability rights to human rights, and how fundamental that is, because I think people think, yeah, I've got a human right to do this, this, and that, but they don't provide a service that supports people with disabilities to experience their human rights.
Yeah.
What resources or technologies have you found particularly helpful in your work with individuals with disabilities?
So I suppose thinking back to the last 10 years that I have worked, the last 15 years that I worked at Northcote, I'd say that I was introduced to some of the technologies that you use there, and also the technologies that Greta uses and Shirls uses to communicate. And how, before coming to Northcote, I really just did not get it, how essential it is for people to be able to have a voice. So understanding that, even though I hate acronyms, augmentative and alternative communication is absolutely essential. And learning that people, how they use it, and how you can communicate the best, how you can use it the best. And that's different for everyone. And just being able to relax with that, and just knowing that it'll take some time to understand how people use it. And it can be a fancy thing like your eye gaze, which, how much does that cost?
You remember how much it costs?
It's thousands, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. But also a pen and paper is also okay. I can remember when I first worked with Shirls, and she uses, and she still uses, a basic alphabet board to spell out names. Doesn't cost anything to write that down.
A phone. Yeah. Or if you have something to say, and we'll say the alphabet and you put what letter you say yes to. Yeah.
And that's another thing. So technology, mainstream technology, has, like iPhones, have been wonderful in supporting communication with people who need some support, electronic support, because it's so non-stigmatizing. And yeah, so people can use just cool iPhones, and that's brilliant.
Yeah. So my turn? How did you navigate the ethical considerations and potential bias in providing support to individuals with disabilities?
Can you ask it again?
Yeah.
How did
Mm.
I?
Go on. How did you navigate the ethical considerations and potential bias in providing support to individuals with disabilities?
Okay, some of the first, so the first thing that springs to mind when you say about ethical considerations is when I became a social worker in the mid 1980s in Manchester in the UK. I met a few women who were perhaps in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and they'd all been sterilized. And they'd been sterilized, I'm not sure. These were women who had intellectual disabilities, sometimes not significant, and they had been institutionalized. And the fact that they had probably been, some of them had been sterilized without sort of knowing what that was or what it meant. And just thinking, just such a huge thing had happened to these women, and that they were kind of menopausal and in their 20s and 30s. Wow, what's the ethics on that? And that was the 80s, and I think you and I have talked about this before. That still happens. That still happens a lot. That kind of forced sterilization of women across the world. And I think I said to you recently, in Spain, it was only made illegal to sterilize a woman, and that was a couple of years ago. So it's just amazing that the ethics of disability is a really, really live issue.
Yeah. Crazy. They still do it.
And people with Down syndrome would say, it's happening to them. Most women who get pregnant nowadays in Australia can have a test to see if they're carrying a baby with Down syndrome. And so, lots of people then choose whether to carry on with that pregnancy or not.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to someone considering a career in the disability field?
My advice would be go for it. Absolutely. Especially because I think it's just so stimulating, so rewarding. Especially if you've already got experience. So I didn't have experience. I went to schools in the UK where there were no people with disabilities in my primary school, and I had no direct experience and no one in my family. But I think if you have experience of having someone with a disability in your life, if they're a sibling or something like that, or if you've got lived experience of disability, it would make you absolutely so much better and stronger, a stronger advocate, and you'd be able to do a lot regardless of what role you're in, whether it's as a support worker or as a CEO. I'd say go for it.
Neat.
It's a very rewarding area to work in.
Yes.
Yeah, you agree. So yeah,
So agrees. What is your chronic illness?
Okay, mine is an autoimmune disease that I was diagnosed with in January 2019. It's called myasthenia gravis, which means severe weakness of the muscles. So it means if I'm very tired, it's difficult to swallow, I forget words, get very weak. So I'm on some lovely corticosteroids all the time, so that's probably permanent. And I'm on kind of combination of other fabulous drugs. And I'm very, very lucky to live in Australia now, because our Medicare system is very, very good, especially if you live in cities. So yeah, that's me.
How did you stay informed about changes in laws, policies, and best practices related to disabilities during your career?
So how did I keep up with changes? I think now that we've got such instant access to social media, I mean, social media is fabulous to kind of keep up to date with things because I've got a short attention span. I don't think that's got anything to do with my autoimmune disease. And, you know, reading long books or policies and stuff like that just can't be, but I switch off. But just short, snappy things about that, you know, on Facebook or that comes in emails or, you know, people's websites nowadays are so much more accessible. So when I wanted to look about the report on the final report of the Royal Commission, you know, it's 112 pages or something ridiculous. So, but there's also, you know, executive summaries and there's copy. I first of all looked at the kind of plain English version as well as the kind of easy read version. Oh yeah, okay. So yeah, looking at things like that.
Can you describe a situation where you had to advocate for a client or patient to ensure they receive appropriate accommodations or services?
Yes, so a lot of the time, and I think this is an ongoing issue when you're working with people who need accommodations because they change, and just because their support needs have been explained once, it doesn't mean that people really understand or their next manager will understand. So I think you know, rather than having formal meetings, it's so much better to kind of keep things informal, not make assumptions that other people know things, because people are often really, a lot of the time, people are really embarrassed to ask outright. So I think that's why, you know, some of the work that we did on you know, kind of having a one-page profile about how to support me at work is kind of handy to tell people, you know, this is how you best support me. And I know Ash Law, who now is kind of the inclusion manager at Northcott, you know, she'll just say, just ask me, because people make assumptions and they don't get it right.
Yeah. That's right. Look at me. Oh, sorry. I thought it was you. Wait, is it you?
What were some of the common misconceptions or stereotypes about disabilities that you encountered, and how did you address them?
Two that kind of spring to mind is one that you're very familiar with, Sev, which is that if someone doesn't verbally communicate, it must mean they've got an intellectual disability. Yeah, you're big eye roll from Sev. So just kind of, yeah. And so sort of saying at the outset, so people don't get embarrassed by them being making that assumption. Some of the times I would kind of just start off the conversation by saying, I'll use you as an example, Seb. Oh, so have you met my colleague Sev? Da, 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 da. She communicates by using eye gaze, and it's fabulous, and kind of telling people in a short way that this is a person that will completely understand everything you say. She's probably already prepared some things to talk to you about already, but when she answers your question, she'll be doing it through her eye gaze, and so our conversation will probably just take a little bit longer. So kind of giving them the message that that Sev is in control. Sev's leading this. She'll know exactly what you're talking about. She'll be able to respond. But you and I need to kind of just, take it down a notch, because people love to talk really, really fast. And, lots of people kind of get embarrassed by having silence or pauses. And that kind of conversation is just about, you know what? You're going to be okay with this. We're going to sit there. So modeling also what you, Seb, would want them to do. So they're comfortable. So that kind of just like, that's my long answer about like saying they have got an intellectual disability. They'll know what you're talking about. But also, if someone does have an intellectual disability, just saying, so again, talking how people need to adjust their communication, and to meet a person's understanding. So that's the first common misconception. I can't remember what the second one was I was going to say. Can you ask it again, Heather? Oh, or Seb, sorry.
What were some of the common misconceptions or stereotypes about disabilities that you encountered, and how did you address them?
You know what? I can't remember my second example, because that one about intellectual disability is the most. Yeah, I can't. It's gone.
That's okay. How did you tailor your approach when working with individuals with different types of disabilities?
I suppose I could use the example of when we do some training that would and some of so participants in that training had different disabilities. So I'll use the example of the Vivid group that was started at Northcote, which was a staff group for staff members with different disabilities. So we had some training and meetings in Newcastle last year, and it was about trying to make the room and the materials accessible as possible for a wide variety of disabilities. So the venue obviously was physically accessible. There's a lot of people in there who would identify as having autism or being on the autistic spectrum, people with ADHD. So yeah, trying to adjust the training to suit people's needs. So it's you need to have a kind of wide variety, and we also asked individually as well, how can we make this a productive and safe learning environment for you?
You want more help? You got it.
for their specific training or professional development opportunities that you found particularly beneficial for your work in the disability field?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, the first thing that I realized I needed to learn was to listen. So I wasn't very good at listening. And so um so I did a counseling skills course, and because also I really I didn't anticipate that I'd be working with people who were experiencing quite a lot of grief and loss. So how to respond to that and how to support people without being overwhelmed by my issues or their issues or wanting to rescue people. So yeah, I'd say counseling skills was a really, really good one. And the second one was presenting and facilitating skills, because one of the things I found that was even team meetings, you know, lots of people just sat there completely disengaged, no one contributed. So, you know, I'm sure these could be done better. And going to meetings where there were people with disabilities and their family members, and again, all the professionals talked at people that, you know, a person with a disability, and talked at parents. I remember thinking, you know, God, this is so, you know, I was embarrassed. I was thinking, you know, it's so disempowering. So learning about, you know, what was called person-centered meetings, person-centered work. So kind of shifting some of that power. So in meetings, you know, you'd support a person to have prepared for it, to be able to ask them, you know, what are your priorities, so they can get a chance to talk about stuff. So it wasn't dominated by professionals. So learning about person-centered practices and then learning how to put that into practice is invaluable. Yeah, it really made me feel like I could support people so much better.
In what ways did you calibrate with families to support individuals with disabilities?
So I suppose what I just mentioned then was one of the ways I collaborated with families, because meetings can be so disempowering for families. You know, decisions could be made and they felt I had no say in it at all. So one of the ways I collaborated with families would be to do some work with them about, look, there's this meeting coming up, you know, you're not happy with this, you're not happy with that. What's the best way? You know, what are your priorities? What do you want to deal with first? How do you want to deal with it? What do you want to get out of this meeting? So trying to support someone to feel empowered enough to be able to take control of things, but also knowing that I would be there to support them, to be their advocate or voice if they needed it. Help you?
How did you measure progress or success in your work with clients or patients with disabilities?
Well, I don't think I wouldn't measure things by quantitative measures. It would be more about kind of quality. So if I knew that someone that I was working with or a family I was working with were happy with how things were going in their lives, or their child life, their adult's life, if they if we'd had some success, I suppose, at some of their priorities that they identified, their goals.
Yeah. Can you discuss any instances where you had to navigate challenging situations or conflicts within your team regarding disability-related issues?
Um, no, I can't. Yeah, I'm not sure if I can think of anything that springs to mind. Can you ask me the question again?
Can you discuss any instances where you had to navigate challenging situations or conflicts within your team regarding disability-related issues?
I suppose I can think of some things that I probably couldn't give examples, but concrete examples, because probably would be breaking confidentiality. But I can think of examples where people made assumptions about other people or were taken aback by, oh, why is that happening? And I'd kind of say, oh, well, that's because this person needs this, or explain some kind of basic stuff. Because although inclusion sounds easy to do, and treating people as individuals, it's very easy to say, but it's kind of difficult for institutions to do that. And every workplace is an institution. So yeah. It's kind of, it could be kind of, I wouldn't call it conflict, but yeah, adjusting people's expectations.
Yeah.
What changes or improvements would you like to see in the field of disability services or advocacy?
Well, advocacy needs to be funded again. It's been massively defunded. I'd like to see all the recommendations from the Royal Commission's report implemented by organisations. So there's a massive amount of work to do around supporting people to lead lives that are free from abuse, where people get to experience ordinary and extraordinary lives like lots of people take for granted. There's a huge amount of work to be done by everybody in Australia, not just people who work in a disability service.
Yeah. How did your experiences with disability field influence your perspective on diversity, equality, and inclusion in broader contexts?
So it's interesting because disability often gets overlooked. I can remember reading some comments by someone who was on involved in diversity and in inclusion, and they don't invite someone with a disability on the panel. It'll be a kind of someone anyway. Yeah. So I think it's all about. I think it goes back to seeing disability as a kind of ordinary part of Australian life, and as is inclusion, as is okay, I've lost my train of thought. Can you ask me the question again?
How did your experiences in the disability field influence your perspective on diversity, equality, and inclusion in broader contexts?
So I think when I kind of see diversity and inclusion now, I always think about disability and how it needs to be up there when people think of diversity inclusion, because people will think about supporting women in the workplace, which is absolutely fabulous. They think about fighting racism, fighting domestic violence, but sometimes disability kind of gets forgotten about. So yeah, kind of thinking about the big picture of inclusion.
Yeah.
rather than kind of cherry picking.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Liz, for sharing your experiences with Northcote and your own chronic illness. As an ex-employee of Northcote, I want to thank you for supporting me through my own chronic illness. Everyone, make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe. Stay pink and yellow.
Bye.